Everything in the material world eventually wears out and disappears back into the ocean of being that originally threw it forth. The pattern of the unfolding is familiar. The object emerges from being fresh and bursting with life force. It grows and develops, comes into its full maturity, erodes and begins to disintegrate, and finally, worn out, disappears. Its disappearance opens a space and a possibility for new life to emerge. This template of creation, metamorphosis, and destruction applies throughout the universe at the material level. Cells, humans, trees, mountains, planets, stars, and galaxies are all temporary, though the time scale may range from brief to vast. Civilizations also come and go, as history demonstrates. The cultural complex of a civilization is the set of beliefs, assumptions, and perceptions that are shared at both conscious and unconscious levels by its people. It determines what is accepted, largely unquestioned, as reality. It is the culture's worldview into which children are, generation after generation, initiated and educated. The cultural complex extends over time, providing common assumptions about life and reality that serve to bind the people together. The worldview is subject to the same cycle of deterioration and renewal that we observe in the realm of material objects. Societies change. Beliefs change as societies change. Perceptions of reality evolve at the individual level and at the level of society. Today we are on the cusp of a massive shift in our worldview. That worldview, which has been in place for roughly 4 centuries, can be referred to as the Cartesian Newtonian view of reality. One prominent element in the framework is materialism. This is the assumption that the material world is the only true reality. Over the past few centuries, this view has become deeply rooted in the Western psyche, so much so that non-material realities have become deeply suspect and have been largely discarded. Our capacity to perceive non-material realities has atrophied. Today's cultural complex assumes that if something is not embodied in material form, it does not exist. Most of the scientific establishment will not touch it because it cannot be brought into the laboratory, tested empirically, and proved or disproved. This myopic view of reality is reductionist and it is untrue. The most crucial truths are so vast that they cannot be proved, though they can sometimes be experienced. The mental straitjacket of scientific skepticism is currently being challenged by new knowledge thrown up by quantum physics, which deals with the nature of subatomic particles far beneath the level of possible perception. The present Western worldview was put in place by the work of Isaac Newton and René Descartes about 400 years ago. Newton established a set of laws describing the way objects collide in space and transfer energy to each other. Descartes described the universe as a giant clockwork apparatus with the parts mechanically turning around each other. The combination of these two visions established the foundation for a new worldview that has been in place ever since. With that worldview in place, today we experience an empty cosmos of dead space, with only a few objects, such as ourselves, alive in it. A dead and empty cosmos is not a cosmos fit to live in. This worldview, unexamined and held largely in the unconscious, is responsible for the endemic loneliness, desolation, and existential despair that we see in our civilization. We have lost our ground. We no longer feel held by our universe. We are alienated and cut off from the life force and from the source of sacredness. We pass this condition of suffering on to our children, generation after generation, infecting them with the same meaninglessness, alienation, and desolation that we have experienced in our own lives. Quantum physics has discovered, however, that space is not empty. It is teeming with life and activity and being. Subatomic particles are emerging into existence in every cubic foot of space throughout the universe. They call this quantum foam. The particles are not arising from something else that is material. They are arising from space itself, from nothingness, from the implicate order, from unmanifest potentiality. They appear from nowhere and quickly subside back into nothingness, back into space. This discovery quashes once and for all the notion of dead, empty space. It means that the entire universe is seething with livingness. The appearance and disappearance of the particles signals that they are crossing the line from being in its unmanifest form as living potentiality to being in its material form, or particles. We are seeing here how being, itself invisible, becomes the world of visible forms. When the particles aggregate, they eventually become the apparently solid forms of our everyday life. Being is alive and in motion throughout the cosmos, including its space. The Cartesian Newtonian framework is an inadequate and dying worldview. Parts of it may be retained, but the basic idea of a non-living, exclusively material universe operating mechanically like a clock and filled with separate objects and empty space has outlived its useful life. It has become destructive of our society, our humanity, and our stewardship of the earth. It is reductionist and retrograde, an anachronism that threatens our very existence. With luck, it is now disintegrating as renewal gathers strength and waits in the wings.